Alex pulled his beat-up pickup truck up the long, winding driveway. Dust billowed up behind him, coating the rusted chrome in a fine layer of grime. He killed the engine. An unsettling silence fell over the place. He took a deep breath and looked up at the old Victorian house perched on the hill. It loomed over him, dark and imposing. This was his new home. He just hoped he wasn't making a mistake. The house had been empty for years. Locals told stories whispering about the family that had lived and died within its walls. Alex tried to ignore the stories. He told himself he was a practical man. He didn't believe in ghosts. He bought the house because it was cheap. He needed a place to start over, to escape the ghosts of his own past. He stepped out of the truck. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of pine needles. The sun was setting. Long shadows stretched across the overgrown lawn. He grabbed a box from the truck bed and made his way up the creaking porch steps. The front door groaned open as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Alex stepped inside, feeling a shiver run down his spine. The first few days were the hardest. The silence of the house was almost deafening. It was broken only by the creaking of floorboards and the rustling of leaves outside the windows. He spent his time unpacking boxes, trying to make the place feel like home. But no matter how many boxes he unpacked, the house still felt cold and unwelcoming. At night, he lay in bed listening to the sounds of the old house settling around him. Sometimes he thought he heard voices whispering his name. He told himself it was just the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. One evening, while unpacking books in the dusty attic, Alex stumbled upon a small, ornate key hidden inside a book. The key was cold to the touch. It was heavier than it looked, as if it were made of some unknown metal. That night, Alex dreamed of a swirling vortex of colors and shadows. He woke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. Driven by a curiosity he couldn't explain, Alex spent the next few days searching for the lock that matched the key. He checked every door, every drawer, every cabinet in the house, but the lock remained elusive. Just when he was about to give up hope, he stumbled upon a hidden door in the back of a musty closet. The door was concealed behind a faded tapestry. Alex's hand trembled as he reached out and touched the cold brass doorknob. He inserted the key. It turned with a heavy click, breaking a silence that seemed to have lasted for centuries. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase shrouded in darkness. A cold draft of air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unsettling. Hesitantly, Alex stepped through the doorway. The stairs creaked ominously beneath his weight as he descended into the darkness. The air grew colder and heavier with each step, pressing down on him like a physical weight. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing a threshold into a place he was never meant to see. At the bottom of the stairs, he found himself in a long, narrow hallway. The walls were lined with shelves filled with dusty books and strange, unidentifiable objects. The room at the end of the hallway was shrouded in an unnatural darkness. It was as if the very air in the room was absorbing the light. Alex fumbled for the light switch, but the bulb, if there even was one, refused to illuminate. He took a hesitant step inside, his eyes struggling to adjust to the gloom. As his eyes slowly adjusted, he began to make out the shapes of furniture: a heavy wooden desk, a plush armchair, a grandfather clock frozen at midnight. The room was filled with personal belongings: books, clothes, photographs, even children's toys scattered across the floor. It was as if the room had been frozen in time, a snapshot of a life interrupted. Alex reached out and picked up a faded photograph from the desk. It showed a young family, their faces etched with a happiness that seemed at odds with the oppressive atmosphere of the room. He ran his fingers over their smiling faces, a chill running down his spine. Who were these people, and what had happened to them? The room became an obsession. Alex found himself drawn to its unsettling presence, spending hours each day exploring its shadowy corners, examining the strange objects it held captive. He couldn't explain the pull he felt towards the room. It was as if it held a dark fascination for him, a morbid curiosity he couldn't resist. He tried to understand the room, to unravel its secrets. He researched the history of the house, scouring old newspapers and historical records for any mention of the family in the photographs. But his search yielded no answers, only more questions. It was as if they had vanished from history, leaving behind only the ghostly remnants of their lives in that room. As the days turned into weeks, Alex began to notice changes in himself. He was plagued by nightmares, vivid and disturbing dreams of shadowy figures and whispered threats. He grew increasingly withdrawn and irritable, pushing away friends and family. His life outside the room was fading, losing its vibrancy and meaning. The room was consuming him, slowly but surely. He began to talk to the unknown family in the photographs, pouring out his own pain and regret into the silent room. The room was not content to remain confined to the shadows. It began to intrude on Alex's waking hours, bleeding into his reality in ways that defied logic and reason. He would wake in the night to find the furniture rearranged, objects moved to different locations as if the room was toying with him. One morning he woke to find the door to the room gone. The tapestry that concealed it hung undisturbed on the wall, but behind it, there was only solid plaster. Panic surged through him. He searched frantically for another entrance, another way to access the room that had become his sole focus. He ripped at the tapestry, tore at the walls, but the room remained stubbornly elusive. Just when he was about to give up hope, he found the door again. It reappeared as suddenly and inexplicably as it had vanished, standing ajar at the end of the hallway. But this time the hallway seemed longer, the air thicker and colder. The objects on the shelves seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent energy. The room was changing, becoming more assertive, more demanding of his attention. He stepped inside and felt a cold hand close around his heart. The room was different. The furniture was draped in white sheets as if for a funeral. Alex found himself unable to resist the lure of the room. It called to him, whispered promises of revelation and understanding. He spent every waking moment inside its unsettling embrace, poring over the objects, trying to decipher the clues they held. He became convinced that the room was a portal, a gateway to another dimension or time. The objects within it, he believed, were artifacts from these other realities, remnants of lives lived and lost in worlds parallel to his own. He felt a strange connection to these otherworldly objects, a sense of familiarity that both intrigued and terrified him. The room, however, was not a passive observer. It began to torment Alex, subjecting him to strange and terrifying phenomena. Objects moved on their own, as if animated by an unseen force. Whispers followed him through the house, taunting him with half-uttered threats and promises. He would catch glimpses of shadowy figures lurking at the edge of his vision, only to have them vanish when he turned to face them directly. Fear gnawed at the edges of his sanity. Desperation began to set in. The once comforting solitude of the old house on Harbinger Hill had transformed into a prison of fear and paranoia. The room held him captive, its grip tightening with each passing day. He knew he couldn't go on like this. He had to break free from the room's grasp, even if it meant destroying it. He decided to burn it. He gathered armfuls of kindling and old newspapers, piling them high in the center of the room. As he worked, the room seemed to fight back, the air growing heavy and oppressive, the temperature plummeting as if a blizzard had been unleashed within its walls. But Alex pressed on, fueled by a desperate hope for freedom. With trembling hands, he struck a match and tossed it onto the pyre. The flames roared to life, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The room seemed to groan in protest, the air crackling with an unseen energy. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid, but Alex didn't flinch. He stood his ground, watching as the flames consumed the room and everything in it. He stayed until the fire consumed itself, leaving behind only smoldering ashes. Exhaustion finally claimed him. The old house on Harbinger Hill stood silent once more, its secret seemingly swallowed by the flames. Months passed. The charred remains of the room were cleared away. New floorboards were laid. Fresh paint covered the smoke-stained walls. And then, a young couple, filled with the hope and optimism of new beginnings, purchased the house. They saw the potential in the old house, the charm hidden beneath years of neglect. They were unaware of its dark history. They moved in on a crisp autumn day, their laughter echoing through the empty rooms, blissfully unaware of the shadows lurking just beneath the surface. One evening, while unpacking boxes in the attic, the young woman, Sarah, stumbled upon a small, ornate key hidden inside a book. It was cold to the touch. She showed it to her partner, amused by the quirky discovery in their old house. He shrugged, distracted, and returned to unpacking. Sarah, however, couldn't shake a strange feeling of unease as she turned the key over and